forward some of our legislative priorities, to be able to talk and have discussions with some of our senators and our congressmen and congresswomen, and also with some of our state agencies, federal agencies, to really convey who the Rio Grande Valley is, what are some of our challenges, some of our opportunities, and to get some questions answered. Because I know as we talk amongst ourselves, as we conduct business here in the region, there's things that we want to make sure that the public knows about. There's things that we want to make sure that our lawmakers know about. And so that's really the purpose. The delegation from the Rio Grande Valley recently completed a significant visit to the nation's capital aimed at amplifying the region's advocacy priorities and fostering collaboration across various federal departments and representatives. Our key legislative priorities that we talked about, that we took with us, were water and environmental resources, our infrastructure improvements, education and workforce development, healthcare access and quality, border security and immigration reform, economic development and job creation. We created leave behinds. We created material that we could give to each one of the offices, that we could give to each one of our congressmen, congresswomen, and senators, so that way they could know what were our priorities, and we broke it down to the issues that we're facing. We broke it down to some challenges and some opportunities that we think that we could capitalize on, and some asks. So we definitely want to leave them with information that they could better understand us, and hopefully lead them in a direction that we all believe is beneficial to our region. The delegation also met with federal agencies such as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Service, the Bureau of Reclamation, International Trade Administration, or the Department of Commerce, and the U.S. Department of States. We engaged with senators and representatives from various districts, and we emphasized the importance of our collaborative effort. And really, that was the key of it. We wanted to go up with a collaborative voice. We wanted to go up and make sure that we had, that we were able to discuss regional issues, and we believe that it was powerful, and we believe that it was well received. On our trip, we had a great delegation, and I'll briefly introduce our delegation that we had. To start with, Mayor McAllen from Brownsville, Mayor Gonzalez from Wesco, Commissioner Brazas from Wesco, Commissioner Pepe Cabeza de Vaca from McAllen. We had Manny Vela, the director here at the Lower Rio Grande Development Council. And thank you for letting us use your space this morning for our press conference. And Orlando Campos with the Harlingen EDC. So what we'll do now is we're going to have each one come up and address you all. We'll have questions and answers after that. But really the purpose of the original address is to talk about what we experienced, the purpose of the regional effort, and what you experienced and what your takeaway was. So, Mayor Cowan, if you will please be our first. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Like everyone knows, I'm Mayor Cowan from Brownsville.
And now, a workshop of the McAllen City Commission. All workshops are open to the public in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. These workshops allow for detailed staff presentations.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. We're going to begin with item number 1, present questions to staff relating to today's meeting. Are there any questions to provide to staff?
All good? Peter?
No question.
Okay, there being no questions, we're gonna go on to item number 2, discussion of ordinance for pet ownership and signs.
Afternoon, Mayor, Pro Tem, City Commissioners, and Mayor. Good to see you. We are here our office was tasked with looking at a pet cap on ownership within city limits, as well as looking at the sign ordinance. So I'd like to take those one at a time, starting with the pet ownership limits. After we've seen some high-profile hoarding cases of animal hoarding, we did a survey around the state to look at what other cities do to hopefully stem and prevent this. It's not uncommon to see a cap on domesticated animals, and so this would be a proposed cap on dogs and cats. And the number that we have in our current version of the ordinance is 4. So you would have 4 adult dogs, 4 adult cats, or any combination thereof, and then 1 litter of puppies or kittens at one time. Anybody who wishes to maintain animals in excess of that permit, or in excess of that cap, would be able to apply for a permit. That permit would be issued upon inspection by the Animal Care Services Department. Again, it's to promote the safety of the animals, and they would be good for 1 year. So I'm happy to answer questions. We've drafted a proposed ordinance, and we can run through that, but that's the quick overview. Adult cat or dog is over 8 weeks. It's by residence, so it's not for individual, it's at any one location. There's different factors that the inspection would entail, which would be the safety of the animals. They would have to be vaccinated, have current tags, have adequate space, sanitary conditions, food, water, make sure that it's not a nuisance to the neighbors with smell or excess noise. Permits would be on an annual basis. Violation would be a Class C misdemeanor, which we could enforce in municipal court. And then, of course, if a permit is revoked or denied, there would be an appeals process consistent with other appeals processes. And then a new application would have to be submitted if somebody moved or the ownership changed with the underlying residence.
I'm wondering,
Can the permits be online?
I know that we do have a good permitting system online, that we've worked with Code, and they've done a good job with IT to develop that. And I think that's definitely possible to do a permitting process online. The one thing that I would say is the inspection would need to occur in person to ensure that there's.
Sure, the inspection's in person, but if, they find out, or could it be online? And will there not be a fee for this?
As of now, the proposed fee is $50 for the permit, but I mean, that's up to the commission we can rewrite it at your direction.
So the current ordinance prohibits more than 4 animals?
The proposed ordinance there is no limit currently.
Okay, so what is the objective of this ordinance?
The objective of the ordinance is to place a limit on the number of animals that can be held within city limits without an excess animal permit, to ensure that anyone who is seeking to maintain more than 4 adult animals, or whatever limit the commission wants to put, that there's an inspection process to make sure that those animals are provided for and that it's not creating a public nuisance or an animal hoarding situation.
And what was the impetus or reason why?
The uptick in animal hoarding that has.
Okay, so the problem is animal hoarding,
Generally.
right? Generally, which we associate with either neglect or abuse of the animal.
Correct.
And I guess from my vantage point, I suspect those that are hoarding either through abuse or leads up to abuse and neglect are not the type or typical person who's going to
Apply for a
follow the
permit.
ordinance, right? So I look at this from a different perspective, and that's why I asked about the objective. I wasn't being facetious, I really was. If the issue is the hoarding part, which to me is quasi-criminal, right? Quasi, obviously a nuisance. I think there should be more of a perspective of looking at either more enforcement, incentives to report, kind of like Crime Stoppers. If it means snitching out your neighbor because they have 50 dogs and nobody wants to get involved, but if a pecuniary interest is created because, or rationale to report it, it's kind of community caretaking by neighbors and the community in general at large to address the hoarding problem. I look at it from the perspective that this may be taken as a cap to the lawful residents of this community who are wanting to either temporarily or permanent basis adopt or shelter pets. And then, I don't want to say it's punitive, but it's certainly a disincentive to have to be required to make an application and then pay $50 when our objective, as we're working with PVAS, is to encourage more adoption or more rehoming, right? I guess that's the phrase, right? Or temporary shelter for animals. You know, if you're already at 4 and you're an animal lover, which I'm not, but if you are, then you would want to encourage that behavior. But now we're gonna say, well, now you gotta apply for a permit, and on top of that, we're gonna charge you $50. So that's where I go back to the purpose and the impetuous for the rationale. I don't think, from my perspective, that addresses the issue of hoarding. I think the issue of hoarding really is self-reporting, community caretaking, incentives to want to report, and certainly more enforcement.
I share your concerns, Commissioner. I think what we were looking at is adding a tool to the toolkit, which is to fend off the hoarding before it gets to the hoarding level. As in, if a neighbor sees somebody with 8 animals, they have a mechanism where animal care services at the city could take action and cite someone and do the inspections. And while we want to encourage adoptions, the other purpose here is also to ensure that the animals are going to a safe home. And I think everybody who's an animal care lover, an animal lover, wants the animals to be adopted into a safe environment. And so the cap that we have proposed is for adult animals. You could always consider raising the cap to allow for more animals. When we did a state survey, 4 seemed to be common, but I saw others that were 6 or 8. So that's one thing to consider if whatever the commission thinks is reasonable there.
I think 4 is reasonable. Let me tell you why. Because I think I also need an enforcement mechanism with my wife. We have 5, and we take. I mean, my dogs, they go to the spa. They're treated better than I am. But I mean, there's no reason to have more than. And if somebody's going to be taking care of them, to rehome, to do something, I mean, they also need a look. How many can you take care of? I think it has to be limited to a certain amount. It also gives the people a look. There's a rule. There's a limit, and whether they sorry.
Sorry. Talk faster.
But at least there's something. I think there's some kind of enforcement mechanism that's, at least it might deter. And of course, we're still gonna have to be out there looking and hoping to get people to talk about if they see something. But I think we need something.
I agree. Well, I agree with Austin in the sense that it's another tool in the toolbox, right? I do agree that we probably should raise it just a little bit. I think 6 adult dogs, up to 6 cats is fine. I don't see an issue with that, and I think foster animals in foster should be excluded. They're typically temporary, so those wouldn't count, right? If anyone's assisting PVAS, animals being rehomed or in foster or temporarily held, we've asked the community to hold on to strays sometimes. Those obviously would not be counted against, and I think it gives the community the ability to report on something that can get enforced. Allows us to do site visits. I don't agree with a fee. I don't know how many we're going to initially get, right? It's not a business. I don't think the residents should be charged anything.
Correct.
I think the time it takes to register and follow through on that aspect is enough. Just asking for their time and their responsibility, and I think we can manage the rest. But I think it's a good tool, and I think it's a step in the right direction, combined with all the other changes, right? I know a lot of comments I got primarily were focused on spay and neuter, and we want to inform the community that's something that's pretty much high priority, but we've got to take these steps to get to a proper spay and neuter program, including working on the facilities for PVAS. I don't think it's wanting spay and neuter. I think it's getting veterinarians down into the area, which is the most critical thing. Permanent vets, not visiting vets, not these small campaigns, right? We need permanent vets in the valley. But I think this is a step in the right direction to let them know that responsible pet ownership is important to the city of
And that's
McAllen.
the key, exactly, Commissioner. Because all the problem starts exactly with that, with the irresponsible owners of pets. And this is a good, like you said, it's a good tool to go ahead and make sure that the pets have the right size, in the house or the backyard, the sanitary conditions is also, it's not only hoarding, but the sanitary conditions that come with pet ownership. So it's a problem that we have countywide, and McAllen is not the exception. So I agree with you. This is more of a service that we need to provide. So maybe the $50 is a little bit too much. Maybe,
None.
like you said, probably go all the way to nothing and provide the service, and encourage, that responsible pet ownership. And like Commissioner Haddad also mentioned, the spay and neuter is going to be something that we need to start looking at it. And I believe there's a couple of organizations that are already looking into interested veterinarians to come down, and maybe we can have permanent ones as well, and start, this beautiful thing is going to be taking care of the pets and in our community. So, yeah, it's definitely in the right direction. It's a good step, and hopefully we'll support it.
Yeah, I would increase the cap. 8 potentially, or at least 6. And on the permitting, on the annual visit or the site visit, I'd be concerned that it's up to interpretation, or it's not very objective, and so I would ask that there be some clear guidelines on what that would entail, so that it's not up to interpretation. Because I know that I know of at least a couple that would apply for the permit already, because there would be over any one of these 3 caps, potential caps. And so the easier we can make the transition for the public, the better, because it's of interest, and we've gotten a lot of comments already just in the one day that we've posted the notice. And so
This is on for action today, but what I would recommend is if something is passed today, that we do, like we've done in the past when there's significant changes like this with a lot of public input, would be a grace period on enforcement, so that people know what they need to do and apply for the permits. And then afterwards, maybe 120, 180 days, that's when we actually start enforcing. But to do a public service announcements campaign, just to get information out, there has to be obviously an educational campaign once an ordinance is passed, especially if we're going to require these.
Was this proposed ordinance published?
yeah.
The proposed ordinance is published in our agenda packet. It's not been published in the newspaper or anything like that.
Does this type of ordinance require a general publication or notice?
No, it will after it's decided on, we'll have to post it and publish it.
Oh, I see.
Right.
But we don't have to take action today.
You do not have to, but if you do, whenever action is taken, whether today or in 2 weeks or a month
Well,
from
we
now.
read it this weekend, okay? At least, I read it yesterday.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I got in my packet on Friday, so I have to do some thinking about it, but definitely we need to have some control, because there's problems out there. And so we do need to have some controls. I want it as easy as possible for them to get online, for anybody to get online. This is what we have, and then in the week or so, there's an inspection that's done, and there should be something that has some guidelines, that is not totally objective, but there is some objectivity. And then I like the idea that if they still do not agree, that they can go to the city manager and discuss that. And it's somewhere I read that in the packet, so there is alternatives to that. But as easy as possible and as friendly as possible.
Yeah,
Besides-
it's good to point out that the foundation of this really stemmed from research of the other cities that have done it, that have been a little more progressive, and have seen a positive impact. It hasn't been a punishment to the community. It's not the way it's been seen. Where animal care is going, it gives us the opportunity to continue educational pieces, to provide, hopefully, eventually, maybe chip on site, right? That's something that could be added. Lost dogs and stray dogs, are hard, and they're always hard to rehome. So, being able to chip or provide spay neuter options, in the future for homes that have a large number of animals, being able to do annual inspections on a lot of homes, make sure people aren't breeding for sale out of their homes, I think is important, right? It's technically not a legal business, not registered, causes a lot of problems, sickness, and so I appreciate the workshop, but I think we might have to Omar's point, a little bit more detail maybe put together the, outside of the ordinance, also what the permit application would look like, the questions and information it would ask, and
The inspection.
the inspection parameters, you know, because then people would also need a guide to make sure that they meet all those parameters. And with that put together, I'd be in favor of it.
So what happens with a responsible cat lady that has 20 cats? And she's perfect.
She just needs a permit.
She just needs a permit
it.
and,
I mean, it gives us an opportunity, an easier opportunity to engage folks that have 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever. Gives us the reasons to come to their house, right? Because we know, you know, that a year ago or 2 years ago, there were 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever it is. And it gives the neighbors also a chance to advise us, right? I mean, we've made some dramatic changes when it comes to animal care here in the last couple of years. And this is just one other, to use Austin's word, tool for us moving forward. There's gonna be much more to do. And, you know, I agree with everything that I've heard here, certainly from the staff, because it came from us, but it really didn't come from hoarding. I mean, what happened there was that it brought some more attention and more visibility to that issue, but that's not why this is here. It's giving us an opportunity to engage the public when we know that it's out there, when somebody has 8 or 10 or 20. I mean, that's it. I mean, and as far as the fee's concerned, it's not a big deal. It's not a lot of money. This is not a money-making thing. You know, what we try to do when it's a permit and there's an inspection tied to it, we're just trying to recoup some of that cost. Somebody's paying for it. That's you and me. Okay? So the question is, do we pay it through the tax rate or do we pay it because of this special permit? That's up to you.
You know, the other consideration, I forgot what the phrase is, maybe Javier or I can help me. When any piece of legislation is passed in Congress or even the state legislature, it's reviewed by a certain committee to see how it's going to impact the budget. And so I'm already here. Have you taken into consideration the amount of additional personnel, software, and certainly the enforcement part, you know, to look at that, because that means more people, more employees down the line. Because otherwise, this is just a piece of paper that's going to go in an ordinance.
It's minimum.
budget analysis, but that's exactly what I was thinking, because whenever there's an issue with,
That's more work than
Yes.
what we're gonna do out there.
whenever
Yes.
there's an issue with dogs, I think we probably get more texts, emails, social media stuff whenever it's anything with dogs. So my concern also would be that people can start being very abusive quickly. Hey, look, this, even though somebody may just have three or four dogs, hey, this person, and that's, because it gets ugly. I mean, I always remember, yeah, Lois has blood in his hands because I didn't save the dog, you know, stuff like that. And it can have our code enforcement running crazy. But we do need something. I guess we can do
We'd
it
like
and
some
then,
direction on the number, on the fee, so that we'll bring it back, it can be next meeting, 2 meetings. And if the consensus is the fee should be 0, then that's what we'll put in there. That way, we'll put it back on the agenda, hopefully get the same attention the next time. And-
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you want the community to embrace it to some extent, so I'd be okay with no fee for a certain period of time, right, to incentivize a quick registration. And then I think, as to JJ's point, as we measure that resources are getting more and more allocated towards this specific effort, we could either increase the fee, to cover some of that cost, or determine how to do that.
That's an option.
But the initial fee, maybe no fee for first 6 months after enactment, and then I would say it goes to $15 or $20, something minimal.
Okay, how about the number? We're looking at 6, or other than, we'll
6 or
put
8.
your address.
yeah, after they're gone by themselves, that's it.
I would say either 6 or 8. What do y'all think?
I was okay with
I think
six.
8 is a little bit.
Six.
I think
Eight.
six might be okay.
And remember, it doesn't mean that they can't have more than 6, it's just, we wanna know and we're gonna have a
Sure.
permit.
Right, I mean, and that's a couple of questions that I fielded today was exactly that. And I said, hey, look, we're not telling you that you cannot have more than 4. You just have to get register and get the permit, and that's it. I mean, if you're responsible ownership and you have a good condition for the pet, there's no problem. You'll go ahead and be able to do it. And also, they understood after the clarification, so that's good.
And I'll come back with a proposal that reflects the conversations we've had today. One clarification I do want to make is with regards to the fee. I said $50 because that's what was common across the state. But what it is it's set in the ordinance as it's drafted now, which I probably won't change based on today's conversation, is that the fee is established to cover the administrative cost and that it's set by the Director of Code Compliance. And so that can vary. So if we see that there's not a lot of cost associated with it at the front end, like the commission's saying, we can start with the no cost, and then should the need arise, consider changing it by administrative action if it's a budgetary impact becomes substantial. So just one thing to look at, the ordinance itself can have some flexibility built into it to address those concerns. So I will draft that and along with the permit application, and we'll come back. Next was signs. We wanted to talk about signs and what our ordinance allows for already. I know there were some concerns with the enforcement and what tools we have available to us to address signs that are remaining in the right-of-way for too long or that are creating visual clutter. And so I just wanted to do a quick overview of the enforcement authority that's already contained within our code of ordinances. We've have 13084 as the right to the removal of unlawfully placed signs. So any sign that's not in conformance with the city policy and city requirements is automatically declared a public nuisance, and it's tagged or for notice, and the sign itself is tagged, and then it's posted on the premises as well if it's associated with the premises. That's sometimes difficult if it's, the problem is that it's an off-premise sign. There's no premise to post it on. After 72 hours, the city shall remove the sign, so it's tagged. If the sign owner or sign placer does not take care of it, the city can pick up the sign, and then it can be recovered for a $25 administrative fee and $1 per day storage fee. So signs that are not in conformance really should not be left on the right-of-way for more than 3 days once we realize that they're an issue. Proof of ownership is required to pick up the sign, and then they can't just go replace it in the city because it's was already found to be in violation. Dilapidated signs, so those follow a different process. Dilapidated signs are not the same as just a sign that's unlawfully placed in the right-of-way. That's a more involved process. That's when you're looking at a more substantial sign that's part of a business that we're concerned with its upkeep. And those are usually more investment than the little "we buy houses" sign that you see on the trail. This is more for businesses that have large signs that are falling apart, and we want to work with the business owners to give them an opportunity to bring it into compliance. It's not something we can just pick up.
Campaign signs already have a 7-day, quote-unquote, grace period after the election, right?
Right.
To remove, and then, let's say on the 8th day, a sign where, it's the 8th day, right? I guess they get noticed, and then they have 72 hours after that.
That's
So
correct.
cumulatively, they got about 10 days.
That's correct, Commissioner.
How do they get noticed?
The notice is placed on the actual sign itself if it's not in conformity, and then if it's a sign that's on the premise, say I post a sign in my front yard that shouldn't be in my front yard, the door itself of the house can be posted with it. But the sign itself is tagged. So if you place a sign, the sign will be tagged. And that's usually what we're seeing the issue with, is people placing a lot of signs and just never coming in to pick them up. And so you're tagging the sign. Will they ever see it? Maybe not, but everybody
That's the
else is
problem.
seeing it, and that's the problem.
Yeah, okay.
At this point, we're not recommending any changes to the sign ordinance. I know it's just been a conversation, so I just wanted to do a quick overview of the enforcement mechanisms that are already available.
Okay.
I don't have any proposed action, but I'm happy to answer questions.
What's a dilapidated sign follows a different process? For example, political signs also,
These wouldn't be political signs unless they're more like a billboard that's been like released
but
to
what
space.
about the political signs that are in Bicentennial that are half broken and?
Right, so those, if they're unlawfully placed or if they're half broken, we consider them a public safety hazard. There's definitions within the 130-7 for what would constitute dilapidated signs. Some of those larger signs with the wooden frames might meet that requirement, and that's it's a 10-day window, but not a 72-hour window where we give them notice and try to have a conversation with them during that 10-day period before confiscating. It has to be found to be a public.
Under the transportation code, you have a distance as far as the billboards.
Spacing, yes.
What about us for political signs? Can we or we can't?
We don't have one right now.
Could we?
But we can.
Because
We've talked about
bicentennial gets ugly.
We've talked about it, we just haven't put anything in paper yet.
And on those, I do want to have a fee, okay? That and higher, or higher, but I'm also into putting some type of a distance. If we could put that they can't have their same signs, 100 feet apart, is that in this ordinance?
That's exactly what I'm saying about, kind of like the transportation.
Yeah,
code.
I mean, they can't have something within 1,000 feet, or, I don't know what the magic footage is, but this thing of having every 100 feet a sign is just not a large sign.
I think we're gonna have to look at is, if we were to go that route, is to look at the private property rights and First Amendment and make sure that because the spacing requirement, we'd have to phrase it such that you couldn't have signs within X number of feet on the same ownership of private property, because if I wanna have a sign and Mr. Alonso wants to have a sign and he's my neighbor, and I wanna put mine on the east side of my property, and he wants to put his on the west side of his property.
That's a different matter. That's
Right.
Yeah, private property. We're looking at thoroughfares, and we're looking at the Bicentennial and Second Street problems. Bottom line.
But the state does it.
Huh?
The state does it on the highways with the billboards. You cannot have them, unless it's your private. But even in your private, I don't think you're gonna be able to have, 2, 3 billboards and.
Right, there's text dot spacing requirements, and we could we could consider adopting a spacing requirement. We would just have to be very careful with how we phrase that.
I'd be happy to go into a little bit more detail about some of the questions the commission's asking. Some of that goes to the legality that will go into drafting those ordinances, and if the commission wants to consider some of that conversation in executive session, I'd be happy to address it.
This is a workshop, and nothing is finalized, and we're just looking at options, and then we're gonna come up with something that we need to vote on.
Whatever y'all can think of that could limit,
Yeah.
especially like I think y'all know Bicentennial. It's a nice.
Yeah, I certainly understand the concerns of the commission, putting some spacing between the signs, especially along corridors like that. And we are happy to look at the extent to which we are able to recommend modification to the ordinance as it exists.
Any other questions? If not, move on.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So my name is Julia Lash. I'm the Director of the Grant Administration Department. Just so that for some of you that are not aware, our Grant Administration Department has 2 different divisions. We do have the Grant Administration Division, and then we have the Community Development Division. For the Grant Administration Division, what we do is we apply funding for federal, local, and state agencies for the benefit of the city. We work directly with our city departments. Now today, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be presenting on the Community Development Division. For this division, we receive funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We don't necessarily apply for these funds. We do receive annual allocation, but they are formula-based grants, and there is a process in order for us to receive these funds. So, just real quickly, our Grant Administration Department, we strive to improve the quality of life for our McAllen residents while we effectively manage these funds. So now when we're talking about the community development, we do receive these 3 different grants on an annual basis. It is the Community Development Block Grant, which we often refer to as CDBG. It is our Home Investments Partnership Grants, which we often refer to as HOME, and our Emergency Solutions Grant, which we often refer to as ESG. Like I mentioned before, these are formula-based grants, formula based on the extent of poverty, population, housing overcrowding, and age of housing, as well as population growth. Just as a reminder, I like to say, every time I come up here, I like to remind you that it is our 50th anniversary for our CDBG grant. On June 6th, we received the final allocations from HUD. They released the final allocations. So for CDBG, we would be receiving 1.6 million. For home, 512,000, and for ESG, it's the 153,000. In order for us to use these funds, we are federally mandated to award projects and activities by meeting some of these national objectives. For CDBG, we have 3 national objectives. We have to benefit our low and moderate income individuals. We have to aid in the prevention or elimination of slums and blight, or we can use it for an urgent need. And what urgent need refers to in this particular case is urgent need based on a natural disaster. For home, it's to provide decent, affordable housing to lower income households, and for ESG, to provide suitable living environment for those that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a process for us to receive these funds. We are required to have a 5-year consolidated plan, which last year we brought before you and you approved. So we have a fairly new 5-year consolidated plan for 2023 up to 2027. And you also approved the first year's annual action plan along with that 5-year consolidated plan last year. So this year, what we're going to present to you is the second year plan, the second year annual action plan for this 5-year consolidated plan. And it's just a plan that states what we're proposing to fund for that next year. So we have to ensure that whatever applications that we receive meet those objectives and are listed as priorities in that plan. So how do we do that? We have a Community Development Advisory Board that helps us tremendously with the determining where these funds go. This board, we receive the applications and then they review. We meet from December to July, sometimes December to June. It depends on how long. We do meet several times a month, not just one time a month. They review the applications, they vet them. Sometimes they interview the subrecipients. Sometimes we go out and do tours of the different locations of the proposed projects. And like I said, they helped it tremendously. They determine, based on their progress as well, how much funds should go to each particular agency, if any should be receiving them, as well as the projects. So, like I said, we meet from December to July, and they were the ones that helped make these recommendations. I provided a listing for you. I have some pictures up here of some proposed projects, but I did provide a listing for you with the applications that we received and the recommended awards for each one of those projects, as well as those nonprofit organizations. So what are our next steps? Well, in order to finalize the process, we do need to have 2 public hearings, which took place. We have to advertise. So we advertise in the Monitor and in El Periódico. We have to undergo a 30-day comment period and have those 2 public hearings in between that 30-day comment period. We had one, a public hearing on the 26th at Palmview Branch, and we had one on July the 10th at the McAllen Public Library. We did not receive any comments. Today, after this, you will have an action item. The board will present their recommendation to you, and we are required to submit this. Our deadline is August the 16th. So HUD does not give us HUD is not flexible with that date. We have to submit it on that date. We can't submit it before, we can't submit it after. And so HUD has 45 days to approve our plan, and so hopefully by October, we would receive our next year's allocation. Any questions?
Good job. Very good.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thanks so much. No questions, everybody?
Sir?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I guess we'll recess into executive session.
This concludes the workshop of the McAllen City Commission. Workshops are held every second and fourth Monday of the month, convening at 4 p.m. at the McAllen City Commission chamber on the third floor at McAllen City Hall.
And putting them on a platform to reach their full potential, and we're going to do that with all our heart and soul. I've been in education for 28 years, 26 of those 28 with McAllen ISD, and this is one of my proudest moments because it's so outside the box. And for generations to come, I see our students back there, and I already talked to them about how proud